market projections. The same voice that had lied to me for 14 years. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open, the heavy wood swinging silently on its expensive hinges. Sarah sat at her massive desk, her back to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked San Francisco Bay. She wore her power suit, charcoal gray Armani, with her chestnut hair pulled back in a severe bun. The evening sun cast her in silhouette, like some corporate goddess on her throne. Her eyes widened at my interruption, hand flying to her wireless earpiece. "I'll have to call you back, Hiroshi. Family matter." She ended the call with a tap, her manicured fingernail clicking against the device. "David, what's wrong? You look terrible." I tossed the envelope onto her desk. It slid across the polished surface, coming to rest against her laptop. "Open it. I'm in the middle of." "Open it." Something in my voice must have warned her. The color drained from her face as she reached for the envelope. Her hands, usually so steady when handling multi-million-dollar contracts, trembled slightly as she broke the seal. I watched her scan the results, saw the exact moment she understood. Her perfect posture crumpled, just for a second, before she caught herself. When she looked up, her green eyes were glassy with tears. "David, I can explain. 14 years, Sarah." My voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. 14 years of lies. Every birthday, every Christmas, every school play, all of it built on a lie. She stood, reaching for me across the desk. "Please, just let me." "Who is he?" The question exploded from me, louder than ID intended. I heard movement in the hallway, Emma, probably wondering about the raised voices, and forced myself to lower my volume. "Who is Emma's real father?" Sarah sank back into her chair, deflated. "It doesn't matter. It was a mistake, a single mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed, and the sound was ugly even to my own ears. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is burning dinner. This?" I snatched up the DNA results, waving them in the air. "This is betrayal. This is fraud. This is... Daddy." Emma's voice from the doorway stopped me cold. "What's going on?" I turned to find her standing there, concern etched across her familiar features. Features I now realized belonged to another man. The room spun slightly, and I gripped the edge of Sarah's desk to steady myself. "Nothing, sweetheart," Sarah said smoothly, ever the professional crisis manager. "Just a work disagreement." "Why don't you?" "Don't." The word came out like a growl. "Don't you dare try to brush this under the rug. Not anymore." I faced Emma, my heart breaking at the confusion in her eyes. "Emma, I need you to go to your room. Your mother and I have some very important things to discuss. But now, please." She backed away slowly, her gaze darting between us. When she was gone, I turned back to Sarah, who had composed herself once more. "David, whatever you're thinking of doing. I want a name, Sarah. I want to know who you cheated with, who you conspired with to lie to me for 14 years. I want to know everything." She shook her head. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." I slammed my hand down on her desk, making her jump. "Because right now, I'm thinking of every possible scenario. Was it someone I know? Someone we work with? Has he been watching Emma grow up from a distance, laughing at the fool raising his child? Stop it." Sarah stood again, her own anger finally showing. "You want the truth? Fine. It was Richard Keller." The name hit me like a physical blow. Richard Keller, my former best friend, my business partner during the startup years. The man had convinced me to invest everything we had in his revolutionary tech platform, then vanished with our savings 2 months before Emma was born, leaving me nearly bankrupt. "Richard?" The word came out strangled. "All this time, that's why you fought so hard against pressing charges when he stole our money. That's why you insisted we just move on." "Because he was..." I couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah's silence was answer enough. "Did he know?" I demanded. "About Emma?" "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. "He knew. The room tilted again, but this time it was rage rather than dizziness that made my vision blur. Richard hadn't just stolen my money, had stolen my entire life, my identity as a father, and then disappeared to enjoy his millions while I struggled to rebuild from nothing. David. Sarah's voice seemed to come from far away. David, please say something. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 20 years, whom I'd supported through law school, who'd stood beside me as I rebuilt my career from the ashes of Richard's betrayal. The woman who'd watched me love and raise another man's child while keeping her secret. I want you out of the house, I said, my voice eerily calm. Tonight. Pack a bag and go to a hotel. Have your lawyer contact mine in the morning. You can't be serious. She stepped around the desk, reaching for me. David, think about Emma. Think about what this will do to her. You should have thought about Emma 14 years ago. I backed away from her touch. You should have thought about her every day you chose to continue this lie. But you didn't. You thought about yourself, just like you always have. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed again, that same horrible sound. You want to talk about fair? How about we call Richard right now? I'm sure after 15 years, he'd love to meet his daughter. The color drained from Sarah's face again. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? You don't know what I would or wouldn't do anymore, Sarah. You lost that right when I opened this envelope. I headed for the door, then paused. You have 2 hours to pack and leave. If you're still here when I get back, you'll call Emma down and tell her everything right now. Your choice. I walked out without waiting for a response, my footsteps heavy on the stairs. Emma's door was closed, but I could hear her music playing softly. My daughter, because regardless of DNA, that's what she was probably texting her friends, unaware that her world was about to shatter. The garage was cool and dark, my Tesla waiting silently in its spot. I got in, started the engine, and backed out into the gathering dusk. I had no destination in mind, just the need to be anywhere but in that house with its web of lies. As I drove through the winding streets of our exclusive neighborhood, my phone buzzed with incoming texts. Sarah, probably begging or threatening or both. I ignored them, focusing instead on the road ahead and the burning question in my mind. What do you do when you discover your entire life has been an elaborate fiction? The answer came to me slowly as I drove, pieces falling into place like a deadly puzzle. Richard had stolen everything from me once before, and I declawed my way back to success. Now I knew the theft went far deeper than money. But I wasn't the same broken man I'd been 15 years ago. This time, I would make them both pay. I pulled into the parking lot of the Four Seasons, where I'd first met Sarah 20 years ago. It seemed fitting to begin the end of our story where it had started. I took out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Marcus, my assistant with the medical background who'd inadvertently started this avalanche. I need you to find someone for me, I said when he answered. Richard Keller. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. Find him. The second call was to James Chen, the best divorce attorney in California. James? David Morrison. Remember when you said I'd saved your firm from that cybersecurity crisis, and you owed me one? I'm calling in that favor. Clear your schedule. We're going to war. The Four Seasons bar hadn't changed in 20 years. Same amber lighting, same polished mahogany, same soft jazz playing in the background. I sat at the same corner spot where I'd first seen Sarah all those years ago, nursing a glass of 18-year-old Macallan, a small indulgence that would have been unthinkable during those lean years after Richard's betrayal. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah, Emma's asking where you are. What am I supposed to tell her? I let out a bitter laugh that made the bartender glance my way. What was she supposed to tell her? The truth would be a good start, but Sarah had never been good with that particular concept. Before I could respond, a new message appeared, this one from Marcus, found something. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. It's sensitive. My hands trembled slightly as I typed back a quick confirmation. In just a few hours, Marcus had found a lead. The pieces were already falling into place, faster than I'd dared hope. I took another sip of scotch, letting the warm liquid steady my nerves as I planned my next move. The sound of high heels on marble made me tense, but it wasn't Sarah. A young couple took seats at the other end of the bar, laughing and leaning into each other. They reminded me of Sarah and me, back when we were still in law school, before the lies began. Or had they started even then? How much of my life was real, and how much was an elaborate performance? My phone rang, Emma's ringtone. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. How could I talk to her normally, knowing what I knew? But she was innocent in all this. She deserved better than being ignored by another father. "Hey, princess," I answered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Dad." Her voice was small, uncertain, so different from her usual confidence. "What's going on?" "Mom's acting weird, and she's packing bags, and she won't tell me anything." "Are you guys getting divorced?" The direct question, so typical of Emma, hit me like a punch to the gut. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Emma, it's complicated. Your mother and I need some time to work through some things." That's what adults always say when they don't want to tell kids the truth. A hint of anger crept into her voice. "I'm not a baby anymore, Dad. I deserve to know what's happening to my family." My family. The phrase echoed in my head. Was it still my family if it had been built on lies? Looking at the amber liquid in my glass, I made a decision. "You're right," I said softly. "You do deserve the truth. But not over the phone. Can you meet me for breakfast tomorrow? Just you and me." There was a pause, and I could almost see her weighing the offer, analyzing it the way she did everything, a trait she'd learned from me, DNA be damned. "The waterfront cafe?" she asked finally. 8 o'clock. My meeting with Marcus. But this was more important. Marcus would understand. 8 o'clock, I confirmed. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I pulled up my text conversation with Marcus and rescheduled for 9. His response was immediate, "No problem. This might be better anyway. Gives me time to verify a few things." I finished my scotch and stood, leaving a generous tip. The night air was cool against my face as I stepped out onto Market Street. San Francisco sparkled around me, the city lights reflecting off the bay like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably packing her bags, her perfectly ordered world crumbling around her. Good. Let her feel a fraction of the chaos she'd unleashed in my life. My Tesla was waiting with the valet. As I slid behind the wheel, my phone buzzed one final time. A text from James Chen, meeting set with Judge Harrison tomorrow afternoon. She owes me a favor. This is going to move fast. Perfect. Everything was aligned for what would come next. But first, I had to face the hardest part, breakfast with Emma. How do you tell a 14-year-old girl that her entire life is based on a lie? That the man she calls dad isn't really? I shook my head, pushing away the thought. Biology didn't matter. I was her father in every way that counted. And tomorrow, I would prove it by being honest with her, something her mother had never managed. As I drove home through the quiet streets, my mind drifted to Richard Keller. Where had he gone after destroying my life? What had he done with the millions he'd stolen? Did he ever think about the daughter he'd abandoned, or was she just collateral damage in his grand scheme? Soon, I would have answers. Marcus was too good at his job to come up empty-handed. And once I knew where Richard was, what had been doing all these years, well, that's when the real game would begin. I pulled into our circular driveway, noting with grim satisfaction that Sarah's Mercedes was gone. At least she'd had the sense to follow my ultimatum. The house loomed before me, dark except for Emma's bedroom window. A light in the darkness, just like she'd always been. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, I had planning to do. I entered the quiet house, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. On the hallway table, Sarah's house keys lay next to a handwritten note. I picked it up, recognizing her elegant handwriting. "I know you won't believe me now, but everything I did was for our family. When you've calmed down, please call me. We need to handle this carefully, for Emma's sake. S." I crumpled the note and dropped it in the wastebasket. Family. She kept using that word, but families don't lie to each other for 14 years. Families don't conspire with thieves and frauds. Families don't. A floorboard creaked upstairs, followed by the soft click of Emma's door closing. She was still awake, probably wondering what tomorrow's breakfast would reveal. I headed to my home office, closing the door behind me. Opening my laptop, I pulled up a secure browser and typed in a search string I'd been saving for 15 years. Richard Keller Tech Fraud San Francisco. It was going to be a long night. But as the search results populated my screen, a cold smile spread across my face. By the time the sun rose over the bay, I would have the beginnings of a plan. And by the time I finished my breakfast with Emma, the wheels would be in motion. Sarah and Richard had no idea what was coming. But they were about to find out exactly what kind of men they'd created with their betrayal. Last edited just now. Emma's tears were still burning in my memory as I walked into Marcus' office at precisely 9 a.m. The breakfast conversation had gone about as well as telling your teenage daughter that her mother is a liar and her biological father is a criminal could go. Her final words, "I don't care about DNA, you're my dad," had nearly broken my resolve for revenge. Nearly. But now, sitting across from Marcus in his stark minimalist office, that resolve was about to be tested in ways I hadn't imagined. "You're not going to like this," Marcus said, sliding a thick folder across his glass desk. "Richard Keller isn't just alive and well, he's thriving. And he's closer than you think." I opened the folder with steady hands, years of boardroom negotiations helping me maintain my composure. The first photo made that composure crack. Richard Keller, 15 years older but unmistakable, standing on a stage at a tech conference. The banner behind him read, "Quantum Horizons, the future of AI trading." "This was taken 3 months ago," Marcus continued, his voice careful. "He's been operating under the name Richard Kane for the past decade. Changed it legally in the Cayman Islands. The money he stole from you. He turned it into a fortune. Quantum Horizons is now valued at over $2 billion. The next photo showed Richard, no, Kane now, stepping out of a sleek Bentley. "Hey, race the part you're really not going to like," Marcus said. That photo was taken yesterday. Outside Sarah's new office building. My head snapped up. "What?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Your wife didn't just happen to take that new position at Goldman last month. Quantum Horizons is one of their biggest clients. She's their lead account manager." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Sarah's sudden career move, her late nights at the office, her insistence that we attend the upcoming tech charity gala. "They're still in contact," I said flatly. It wasn't a question. More than that. Marcus pulled out another photo, this one from a security camera. Sarah and Richard, sitting close together in a dim restaurant, his hand covering hers on the table. The timestamp was from last week. The rage that bubbled up inside me was different from anything I'd felt before. Colder. More focused. They hadn't just betrayed me 15 years ago, they were actively conspiring against me now. "There's more," Marcus said, but I held up a hand. "Wait." I pulled out my phone and dialed James Chen's number. He answered on the first ring. "David, I was just about to call you." "Judge Harrison." "Change of plans," I cut him off. How much would it hurt Sarah in the divorce if she was caught engaging in corporate espionage? There was a pause on the line. "Substantially. But proving it would be. I'll get you proof." "And James?" "Add Richard Kane, formerly known as Richard Keller, to the suit." "I want everything." I ended the call and looked back at Marcus. "Now. Tell me more." He leaned forward. "Quantum Horizons isn't just an AI trading platform. They're using it to manipulate markets. Small movements, nothing obvious enough to trigger regulators, but compound those movements across thousands of trades. They're stealing from everyone," I finished. "Just like he stole from me. But on a global scale." "Exactly. And Sarah's position at Goldman gives them the perfect cover. She helps bury the suspicious patterns in legitimate trades." I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline. 15 years ago, Richard had stolen my money and my life, leaving me broken. Now he was doing the same thing to countless others, while my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, helped him do it. The plan that had been forming in my mind shifted, expanded. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. This was about justice. And I knew exactly where to start. "The charity gala," I said, turning back to Marcus. "It's next week." He nodded. "All the big tech players will be there. Richard's giving the keynote speech." "Good. Because I'm about to give him a very different kind of platform." I sat back down, pulled out my notebook, and started writing. Hey race, what we're going to need. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Calls were made, favors were called in, and pieces were set in motion. By the time I left Marcus' office, the first phase of my plan was already underway. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, a text from Emma, meeting Mom for lunch. "Don't worry, I won't tell her about this morning. Love you, Dad." I smiled, my first genuine smile in days. Emma's loyalty, freely given despite the truth about her parentage, was worth more than any revenge. But that didn't mean Richard and Sarah didn't deserve what was coming. As I drove toward my next meeting, I thought about the path ahead. The charity gala would be just the beginning. By the time I was done, Richard Kane would wish had never heard the name David Morrison. And Sarah? Well, she was about to learn that betraying me a second time was the biggest mistake of her life. The game was changing. The stakes were higher. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for every person they'd ever stolen from. Richard Kane, formerly Richard Keller, was about to learn a very expensive lesson: some debts can never be repaid in mere dollars and cents. Some debts require a much steeper price. And I was finally ready to collect. The charity gala was everything Silicon Valley loved about itself: excessive, self-congratulatory, and draped in just enough philanthropy to ease the collective conscience. From my position at the bar, I watched Richard Kane work the room, moving from group to group with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to being the center of attention. The same charm that had once convinced me to invest everything in his revolutionary platform was now working its magic on a new generation of tech elite. Sarah stood nearby, stunning in a black Versace gown, playing her role as the Goldman Sachs power broker perfectly. Every few minutes, her eyes would dart to the entrance, then to her phone, then back to Richard. Waiting. Wondering. She knew me well enough to know I wouldn't miss this event. What she didn't know was exactly how right she was. "Feeds are live," Marcus' voice came through my hidden earpiece. "Every financial journalist in the country is connected. SEC and FBI surveillance teams are in position. Whenever you're ready." I straightened my Tom Ford tuxedo and checked my watch. 8 minutes until Richard's keynote speech. 8 minutes until everything changed. "Dad." I turned to find Emma standing behind me, radiant in her deep blue gown. After our breakfast conversation, Shed insisted on being here tonight. "I want to see justice done," Shed said, with a maturity that made my heart ache. "You don't have to stay for this part," I told her softly. She squared her shoulders, a gesture so like her mother's that it hurt. "Yes, I do. Family stays together, remember." I pulled her into a quick hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. When had my little girl grown up enough to understand concepts like justice and accountability? "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the ballroom. "Please take your seats. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Richard Kane, will begin shortly." I watched Richard make his way to the stage, stopping to kiss Sarah's cheek as he passed. The gesture was casual, proprietary, a man confident in his ownership of everything he surveyed. My hand tightened around my glass. "Ready on all channels," Marcus confirmed in my ear. "Emma, go sit with your Aunt Claire," I said quietly. "Whatever happens next, remember I love you." She squeezed my hand once and disappeared into the crowd. I took a deep breath and moved toward the stage. Richard's voice filled the room, smooth and practiced. "Thank you all for being here tonight. When I founded Quantum Horizons, I had a dream." I stepped out of the shadows, remote control in hand. The massive screen behind Richard flickered, his corporate logo replaced by streaming financial data. "What you're seeing," I announced, my voice cutting through his, "is live proof of the largest financial fraud in history." The room went silent. Richard froze mid-sentence, turning to stare at me with genuine shock. Sarah half rose from her seat, then sank back down as realization dawned on her face. "For the past decade," I continued, Quantum Horizons has been using its AI platform to manipulate global markets, stealing fractions of cents from millions of transactions. The same way its founder, Richard Keller, yes, Keller, not Kane, stole from me and countless others 15 years ago. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Security started moving toward me, but stopped as federal agents emerged from various points around the room. But hey, race, what nobody knew, I said, my eyes locked on Richard's increasingly pale face. Nobody except my daughter Emma. Sarah's sharp intake of breath was audible in the sudden silence. You see, Richard, while you were busy building your empire of lies, I was teaching our daughter everything I knew about coding. And 6 months ago, she discovered something interesting in quantum software, a backdoor. One that looked remarkably familiar. Richard's eyes widened as understanding hit him. I smiled coldly. The same backdoor you used to steal my company's funds 15 years ago. The one you were so proud of that you kept using it, never imagining that the daughter you abandoned would recognize her own father's coding signature. Emma stood up, tablet in hand, her young face set with determination. I found it during my summer internship, she announced clearly. And I showed it to Dad, my real dad, the one who was there for every moment of my life. The screen behind Richard erupted with scrolling code, each line highlighting the systematic theft that had built his fortune. But he wasn't looking at the screen. He was staring at Emma, seeing for the first time what he had thrown away. The SEC has everything, I continued. Every transaction, every manipulation, every theft. But that's not the real surprise, is it, Sarah? My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, had gone completely still. The real surprise is that while you two were so busy conspiring together, you never noticed that Emma had her own plan. Every dollar you stole, every cent you manipulated, she was tracking it. Reversing it. Sending it back to the people you stole from, with interest. The room erupted in chaos as federal agents moved in. Richard lunged for his phone, probably trying to trigger some failsafe, but Emma held up her tablet. Already disabled, biological father. Turns out I inherited your coding skills, but Mom's ethics. Lucky for me, Dad, my real dad, taught me how to use both for good. As the agents led Richard away in handcuffs, Sarah finally met my eyes across the room. The question in them was clear: had I known all along? Had this whole revenge plot been Emma's idea from the start? I smiled, remembering the day 3 months ago when Emma had come to me with her discovery. The day my 14-year-old daughter had looked me in the eye and said, Dad, I found something bad. Really bad. And I think we need to make it right. The DNA test that had started all this. It had been Emma's idea too. We need proof, Shed said. Proof that biology doesn't make a family. Actions do. As the last of the chaos subsided and the journalists swarmed in, I felt Emma's hand slip into mine. Sarah was being led away by another group of agents, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. Richard was already gone, his empire crumbling in real time as news of the fraud hit the global markets. Ready to go home, Dad? Emma asked. I looked down at my daughter, my brilliant, ethical, amazing daughter who had orchestrated the perfect revenge not for herself, but for justice, and felt a pride so deep it brought tears to my eyes. Yes, Princess. Let's go home. As we walked out into the cool San Francisco night, I realized that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes, it's about proving that their worst actions brought out the best in those they left behind. Emma had proven that tonight. And in doing so, she had given me the greatest gift a father could ask for, the knowledge that DNA doesn't make a father. Love does. Choice does. And every choice I had made to love and raise her had helped create something Richard Keller could never understand, a legacy of justice.